Hey, you guys. So, I'm really upset about all the warmongering that's going on, and specifically how the government keeps lying to us. If we question the wars, they call us names. That's called gaslighting. We're not allowed to question it. And obviously, when they hold the daily briefings at the White House, you can just tell they're evading, they're lying, and they're not doing it in the name of national security, which is one thing. Like they might not want to tell us, all the emergency plans they have or anything like that, or secrets about how they built their weapons or, diplomacy talks that are going on. But they shouldn't lie to us about why we're in a war, and they are. They're lying to us about Ukraine. The US has provoked Russia for 20 years, and if you question it and say Russia could be right, they label us a Putin apologist, which is supposed to be a bad word. But I actually think Russia is doing a good thing. I actually find Russia very calm and reassuring and not so hysterical and aggressive and violent about trying to start wars all the time. I think that Russia has a right to neutral countries around their border, just like we do. We're very privileged in the US because we don't have anyone trying to attack us at all. We are surrounded. We have peace. We have like Mexico is never trying to attack us, neither is Canada, and we don't have foreign countries from South America coming up into Mexico, putting their military on our borders in Mexico. We don't have Russia putting their missiles in Canada. And then we have the oceans on both sides. So we're very protected. We haven't had a war in our country for years, like 100 years. I don't know. I'm not a great historian. Like, other than the Civil War, we have not been attacked since the age of the colonialism, like a long time ago. Not in my lifetime, but in my lifetime, the US has attacked many countries for no reason at all. Not for defense, but for offense, to gain power, to gain military superiority. And apparently, there's been this long time plan to weaken Russia and China, and by putting US military bases all around on their borders, and they don't like that in the same way we wouldn't like that. So, they're lying to us. There's no reason for it. And when we sanctioned Russia, and we actually brought Russia closer to China and strengthened their currency. Russia's economy is really growing because when the European Union and the US sanctioned Russia, they just started selling their products to India and China and building stronger alliances. And now they're starting to trade in their own currency. We are weakening ourselves by making these enemies. Um, it's all just very upsetting to me. I really do not feel like talking about sex or anything at all. I find all this very upsetting that they're lying to us. In other news, I've been following the Karen Reed trial. You might want to check that out. It's going on right now. It's very interesting because the prosecution is saying that she hit with her car her boyfriend, a police officer, John O'Keefe. This happened in the Boston area. You might want to look up Karen Reed, Read. It's all over the news, all over YouTube. But the defense is saying she was framed. And the interesting thing there is, and the more gaslighting, because the officer was found barely alive on the front lawn of another police officer with a lot more standing. And so the police department that did the investigation, there is so much shoddy stuff going on. It's so shoddy. And I'm watching the parts of the trial and in broad daylight seeing all these police officers perjuring themselves and lying, obviously lying. Just one example, when they were showing the footage of her car that was in the Sally Port, which is the police station garage, they showed the video. The prosecution inverted the video and showed it that way, never said it was inverted. But when the cross came up, they showed it was inverted and there were parts of the video missing. Like, there's so much missing evidence, things that weren't done, no chain of custody for the items. Like, what probably happened is this officer that was found barely alive went into the house. Somehow they killed him and put him out on the lawn. So I like to see when people lie that they are found um, guilty. But the interesting thing about the government and this case is that in this case, you can actually see why people lie. The same way that the government is lying. So you can watch these people on the stand. They, by the way, the police department and the Massachusetts State Police Department is under FBI investigation for their frame job, by the way. Okay. So watching these people lie has been very interesting because it gives me a firsthand glimpse into how people are so identified with their story, their power, their position. Because the guy who owns the house where the dead officer was found has a lot higher standing in the police community than the officer who was found. And so the allegiance was right away to the guy who owned the house. They never went in to investigate, to question him because, you know, he was like one of the head guys. His name is Brian Albert, I believe, officer. And it kind of reminds me of the case of J.P. Miller and Micah Miller. He's a pastor, so he was not questioned with years of domestic abuse and violence against his wife, with 14 police reports that she filed. She finally killed herself because she was at her wit's end. Her family just came out with Micah's Law because despite all of these police reports, all the times he followed her, he put trackers on her car, all the things he did, I'm going to make a separate video on that. The police did nothing. And I think the reason they did nothing is because he was the pastor. He was the pastor, so they automatically thought, well, he's the pastor. That's how the church was able to keep all the abuse of children under wraps because no one wanted to question the church. And again, no one wanted to question Brian Albert. He was their buddy, you know, their allegiance was to him. And people don't want to question the government. I know so many Americans who are like, I pledge allegiance to the flag. I love my military. But even a lot of the military are very upset about all the stuff that we're doing. So the point is when people are either so committed to their power, to their status, or they're blinded. They're blinded to truth. People get blinded to truth either because they want to cling to their own power or they're unable, or they have put someone on a pedestal, like they put their friend Brian Albert on a pedestal. So they didn't do a proper investigation. They put the pastor, John Paul Miller, on a pedestal, so they didn't question his wife's claims. People put P. Diddy on a pedestal, so they overlooked all of his years of abuse because he had money and he had power. And a lot of people put the US government on a pedestal because they have allegiance to this country and they keep voting in the same people. The California keeps voting in Newsom. Why? He's on some kind of a pedestal because these people are like, I'm a Democrat, he's a Democrat, without even looking at what these people do. I think that people have blinders on and they're not committed to the truth. That's what I want to say. People, and when you're on the stand lying, and I'm going back to the Karen Reed case, with these officers and the spouses of these officers on the stand lying, it's really hard for them to keep the truth straight because when you're lying, it's hard to remember things. And when they ask you questions out of order, it takes a lot of mental effort. And their lives have been very difficult because they never thought that their case would make like the media like this, or they would be under FBI investigation. They thought they could cover it up because they threw him out on the lawn in the early morning hours. And one of the people that was in the house Googled how long to die in the cold, misspelled HOS. If you Google Haas, long to die in the cold, you will see all of this come up also. They never thought that they would be under investigation, but Karen Reed, who supposedly killed him, she was home sleeping during that time. There's just a lot of stuff. So they're trying to cover it up. They're trying to keep their lives going. And it's very stressful to lie. And it's not a good, peaceful life. But they cling to their power. They cling to their status. And part of part of our one thing of our human experience, I think, is not being so tightly gripped around identity and power and status. That's I think that we have to be willing to stand for truth, stand for something, not our own power and our own false flag, but to stand for truth, to stand for love, and to stand for something. Truth and love. That way you'd never have to lie. You might be broke, but you don't have to lie. To be willing to stand for those things. That will make a life a lot better. Yeah. And our government doesn't stand for truth or power. And I think people feel that. And because people feel that, there's all this internal fighting going on. And just the way that we see John Paul Miller fall from grace, just the way that we see um, the Brian Albert and his whole clan lying on the stand, all those police officers lying on the stand, and they're all being called out for it as witness in broad daylight. We're seeing the US government being called out on their lies because we have YouTube and we have all these geopolitical analysts, retired colonels, retired CIA intelligence officers, and independent journalists who have left mainstream media, not just Tucker Carlson, but Kim Iverson, Glenn Greenwald, the Gray Zone, Max Blumenthal, and Aaron Mate. There's another lady I watched, Sabby something. There are all these independent journalists who are showing us what's really going on and kind of helping us see the truth. And the US government is slowly losing its place in our esteem, but also not just being exposed and being devalued in our eyes because they're obviously lying. I don't even know why the White House has press briefings, because it's just, yeah, I can just tell that they're lying. But there's also, not only are we exposed when we lie, but we lose our standing in the community and among the people that we can be more powerful when we work together with people in ways that are mutually beneficial. So John Paul Miller has been under FBI investigation for fraud, financial fraud in his church, and now he's exposed to the whole world through all the media coverage. You might want to Google Micah Miller, and you'll find out all about him. He's all being exposed, and he's ruined his life. Now his ex-wife is trying to get sole custody of their 5 children because of all of his bad stuff that's come out. In the Karen Reed case, these people have fallen from grace. They're under FBI investigation. They'll probably all get some kind of a criminal conviction for lying and covering up the murder of this officer. In the case of the US government, we are losing our standing in the world. Our dollar is devalued. And these countries that we have ousted by sanctioning them, they're all now working together. We sanction North Korea, we sanction Iran. We have a very ambivalent relationship with China, poking the bear by putting weapons in Taiwan, by starting a war against Russia using Ukraine as a proxy. It's us fighting Russia. It's our intelligence, it's our weapons, it's our leadership. And when Zelensky tried to make a peace deal with Russia in March of 2022, the US said, no, we are not done. We need to keep this going to weaken Russia. Well, we're weakening ourselves. And now other countries around the world are going, what? When the US doesn't like us, they freeze our assets? We are going to have to make an alternative currency system. And that's what they're on the works to do, because they can no longer trust the US. Anyway, so in order to be prosperous, it really helps to be not a big bully, but to be standing for truth and to powerfully have good boundaries. Good boundaries means you don't go around killing people and harassing people and bullying people. Good boundaries is kind of what I think China and Russia are showing us. I think they're a wonderful example of healthy boundaries because they're actually working together. And when the US provokes them, they're just like, they're not reacting. They're just silently making plans for building their own alliances. That's real power. That's real power. Real power comes from a commitment to something good, for standing for something good. That's what I think. Thank you for watching my video.